portfolio and really shaking their heads about what is this going to mean longer term for all those office buildings, not just in the city, but of course, in their case, worldwide.
Okay, well, we have a quorum. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Economic Development and Affordable Housing for October 6th of 2020. The time is 7:06, and I'll request that Simon call the roll.
It's August, not October.
Did I say October? August 6th. Correct the record, August 6th, 2020.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll go ahead and call roll. Committee Member Brinkerhoff.
Here.
Committee Member Carney.
Here.
Committee Member Gilliland.
Here.
Committee Member Jones.
Here.
Committee Member Corhan.
Here.
Secretary McCollum.
Here.
Committee Member Miller.
Here.
Vice Chair Nigel Reese.
Here.
Chair O'Connell.
Here.
Committee Member Silva Khan.
Here.
Committee Member Smith.
Here.
Great, thank you. This meeting is being held virtually, and viewers are welcome to provide public comment online or by telephone at 669-900-9128, and the meeting ID is 818-858-8934. If you are watching the meeting on Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please select the participants icon and raise your hand. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press star 9 when the chair opens the public comment period. When it is your time to speak, you will hear a notification that you have been unmuted and you have 2 minutes to speak. And just for the record, we do not have any attendees from the public at this point.
Okay. First agenda item is the minutes of the July 2nd meeting. Any comments on the minutes?
Very concise.
Yes, you fit it on one page.
Well done. Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it's passed. The next item is public comment on non-agenda items. Since we don't have any members of the public here, there's nothing to be done there. That's interesting. My script says we move to project updates, but that's not right. The main item for consideration is, and I just want to phrase it the way that it appears on the agenda, if I can find my agenda here, a discussion of dining under the lights, which is the 4th Street closure of outdoor dining. I'd like to begin this. Marie suggested this topic, and I'd like to begin by having her just discuss what she had in mind and what she thinks is worthy of discussion about that program.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I have seen a few of you out at Dining Under the Lights, and I know that I've really enjoyed it. As a private citizen, I've reached out to Simon and Danielle, as well as our city council, to talk about how do we expand it, how do we capitalize on the success. I've talked to a number of business owners downtown while I've been out enjoying myself on Thursdays and Friday nights, asking them what they would like to see, if they would like more nights, etc. And I've also now since been also chatting with Ida from the BID about some of the challenges to expanding. And Simon can probably give a little bit better history, but what I think is worthy for us to discuss as a group that's concerned about economic development is there something that we can advise council on, or maybe ask for more information from city staff to make the program richer, to maybe better support our businesses, to make sure that we're doing everything that we can as a city to make businesses in San Rafael be successful and weather this storm of a pandemic. But also, I think that we can all realize that there are other stakeholders in this. Our community, our citizens are also important pieces of this. And the kind of mission of making San Rafael the cultural hub of Marin. I don't know about any of you, but I've been out and I've met people from all over the county coming down to enjoy our city, which I think further promotes what we're working towards, making San Rafael the center of Marin. So I thought it would be good as a committee if we discuss just kind of what's going on, what we have noticed, what we've discussed with other stakeholders in our community, and hopefully, if not this month, but be able to send some recommendations to council. But I think it would be helpful if Simon also gave a little bit of a background on how the program got to where it is right now and what are some of the barriers to expanding it. And I can also fill in just some information that I've gathered talking to the BID and also our vice mayor about some of the pushback that people have been getting. But yeah.
Well, you're on a roll, Marie. Give us the results of your survey.
All right. Sure. So when I've informally discussed this with business owners downtown, and I've only really spoken to restaurant owners, they would all like to see more nights. They would like to see 4 nights, 5 nights, all weekend closure, to be able to really, get their food orders correct and really have a robust, traffic to be able to be successful. They're all telling me that they need 4 nights. The pushback from the BID and the vice mayor is that there are a lot of retail businesses that don't see it as being successful. And that if it were to close, let's say all day during a Saturday, that they would lose out on their most important retail day. I think that there's ways around that, that, if retailers are encouraged and given good opportunities to expand onto the streets, I think that could be something, but, it's all in the perception. If they perceive this to be hurtful to them, it would be hard to get them on board. And basically, council would have to vote to allow the expansion to more nights. So they, according to our vice mayor, they are waiting to hear from the COC and the BID before they would move to make such a change in policy. So there's kind of that.
Is the BID,
you might have other background.
Is the BID sort of monitoring or seeking views from their members to find out what the consensus is, particularly resistance of non-restaurants to closing the street?
Yeah, so the BID is monitoring comments and feedback from businesses. There is no consensus at this point about what the next steps are, or if there will be any next steps for the event. So they monitor the feedback from their merchants who participate and those who don't on a regular basis. Ida does an amazing job doing outreach. She regularly goes to the events themselves and actually goes door to door for most of them when asking for their participation. So she's gotten to hear a wide variety of comments and responses from the businesses in downtown.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like from the people that I've talked to, as well as the business owners, as well as the kind of government officials that I've spoken to. The BID does seem to be very active in Ida going out and meeting with everybody. Although anecdotally, I've heard that the Chamber of Commerce has not been. That could just be one person that I've talked to. But also I don't think that we can rely on them to, bring us that information as a government, so.
I think the chamber relies on the BID for this. It's sort of, BID and the chamber work really closely together, and they don't duplicate efforts in that regard. That's why they would be hearing from the chamber directly.
So my understanding is that there are a lot of other communities that are doing similar things. And we were just down in Santa Barbara as an example, and they have actually permanently closed down State Street, which is their main drag, and then demarcated, spaces for each of the restaurants. And it's a 7-night-a-week dining under the stars kind of thing in Santa Barbara. And it's been very successful for them. We also stopped in Ventura, I think it was, and they did the same thing, although it wasn't a 7-night-a-week thing. And both places were very well attended. There were large crowds, which isn't a good thing necessarily for the pandemic, but it was all outdoors. Everybody that we saw was dutifully wearing masks, except when they were eating or drinking. So it seemed to be a good thing. With that said, the Apple store on State Street in Santa Barbara was all closed up, not operating. Many other retailers were all closed. So for the non-restaurant retailers, may not be the best thing that they close down the street to automobile traffic. So there's a tension there that has to be resolved somehow.
Back when we had the farmers market on Thursdays, I know that some restaurant owners were actually unhappy, not just non-restaurant business, but some businesses, but some restaurant owners who didn't have, stand out in the farmers market were very unhappy, and they thought they were losing business. So it sounds like now maybe some of the non-restaurant retail folks feel the same way about closing down the street.
Yeah, and I can just speak to that. So there were 2 restaurant owners that were unhappy about the farmers market out of all the restaurants. I'd say every other restaurant owner that we've speak with in the past was very pleased about the farmers market. So I just want to be I don't want to say that there was a very vocal minority of people that would complain about the farmers market. I think in this year, what was challenging for us is that because of dining under the stars, we were not able to operate the farmers market. We currently have a mobile farmers market called the Roll and Route that we operate downtown, but we've had this year, I think last week we had 8 customers, and the week before we had 7 customers. So we are getting a consistent amount of complaints from community members, particularly in Gersel Park and the Canal, about not having the farmers market. So just want to share that too.
I'd like to make 2 comments on this. First, I'm concerned that it's only 4th Street. We have a number of restaurants on especially B Street and other streets that are not able to participate in this. But also, as again, a woman of a certain age, I'm not comfortable going down there. It's just too, between people walking and then sitting on the street, I don't think it's safe. And I've heard this from a number of my friends that we're not going down. We're doing takeout as much as we can. We're supporting our restaurants in other ways, but absolutely not going down for this event.
Katie, can you elaborate a bit on the safety element? I'm not quite sure where you're feeling unsafe about the relative to the virus or relative to other factors?
To the virus.
Okay.
You've got tables, you've got people walking by. It's just too many people too close.
Yeah, I've heard that also anecdotally.
I will say a lot of the people that I see out are of a younger generation. But also my husband noticed this when we were out last week. He said, all of these are kids that were supposed to be going to college, and they're not going to college right now. And so there's a population that's, in Marin County that we usually don't see at this time of year that would be leaving. And they seem to definitely be taking advantage of it, which is, just a funny anecdote. But there are a lot of people out. I do see everybody wearing masks, and everybody seems to be acting very responsibly and safe. But, I think everybody also has their own kind of risk level that they're willing to endure. So I think naturally there will be people that don't feel comfortable going out into that environment, until a vaccine is all out. So.
And I just want to be clear, We are not, about the people I'm talking about, we do socialize in our backyard. We do socialize at open air restaurants that have space. It's that environment that we're concerned about.
The pushback from the farmers market from non-restaurant people has existed for many, many years. I don't know if there's any way around it. You know, it's hard to say whether it's fair or not. If their customers can't get in there, maybe it's not. Maybe we find a way to invite some of them to be outside also. I think the you know, the invitation has mostly been, as far as I know, to food purveyors, and you know, not to regular retailers. And of course, they're not used to being open in the evening. It'd be interesting to see whether allowing them to be out, asking them to be out, and if they come out, whether in fact people then start patronizing them.
What do we do about the restaurants that are not on 4th Street, though? Is that been discussed at all?
So there is a communal table that's available for restaurants who are not located on 4th Street. So if you'd like to set up on 4th Street, you would just work through the BID to set up that way.
You'd have to move your food in from your kitchen remotely, right?
Yeah, so the logistics would be up to the restaurant because it's not going to be right in front of your storefront on 4th Street. So trying to make an additional table available for people who aren't located on 4th Street is at this point the solution that we have for them. I do want to point out that there's going to be varying, you know, degrees of agreement in terms of whether or not to expand it. Mari's kind of had a lot of touch points with our BID and Vice Mayor Collin. And what I do want to add is that it's going to be limited in terms of how much funding we have to expand. If we do decide to expand the street closures, the city is going through a fairly challenging time budget-wise. So I do just want to put that out there. The CAC obviously is more than welcome to voice their opinions on what they'd like to see, though, in the future.
Well, Simon, what kind of costs are there associated with this?
Yeah.
Is this police or?
Police?
Yes, so it's police.
Barriers out?
Yeah, police is, I think that right now they've expressed to us that they are quite limited. They don't feel that they're able to do more than 2 nights. That might change. We have special events who does the setup of the street closures and arranging of the barricades and towing vehicles if needed. And the BID is offered to fund a portion of that, but they're also you know, facing a difficult financial situation as well. So we are not certain where that would come from at this point in terms of trying to replace the resources needed to expand.
I'll speak for the middle younger generation, which is my kids, who are in their 50s and 60s, and they enjoy going down and having dinner, but they would not go every single night, or they might go once or twice a month, but they would not go all the time. The other thing is that for retailers to put their goods out on the sidewalk, if you're the owner and you are also the salesperson, then you have to watch that somebody doesn't walk off with it. And that is a big problem. And I think to ask the retailers to do that is asking a lot right now when they can barely hang on as it is. So I can see a couple of nights a week, but I certainly, and not starting till 6 o'clock. so that the stores will have a chance to get some business beforehand.
What are the rules right now relative to non-restaurant retail?
So retailers have an opportunity to actually display their merchandise today. But from what we've heard, they're not comfortable taking advantage of that. Actually, kind of, it speaks to what Gladys had just said. They don't feel that they're able to go ahead and display their merchandise, monitor it, and do transactions close to their store and definitely not away from their store.
Right.
So
I get that, but what about indoor shopping? Is that allowed, or is it curbside?
As far as I know, retail is still open, depending on the county. So in Marin, it's open. You would most likely see the smaller retailers take advantage of curbside pickup, though. So there are challenges with curbside pickup when dining under the lights is on, because curbside pickup is not available during those closures. But we haven't seen a whole lot of objections to that. There hasn't been a whole lot of conflict between the two at this point.
I'm a little confused. I've been in stores over the last week on 4th Street, the art store and the electronics store, and they seem to be operating normally. I don't see any curbside pickup as distinguished from just going in and doing your social distancing and buying your merchandise. It seems like it's pretty normalized.
Well, it depends on the merchant. So a lot of our merchants who are putting a lot of their clients and customers, feedback to heart. There's a certain segment of the population that wants to support our small businesses, but they don't feel comfortable going into a store. And I think one good way to support our small businesses is to purchase something either over the phone, or if they have a website, through their website. And instead of having it shipped, since they live close by, they'll just go to, a curbside parking location that we've set up, and they'll hand off the product to them. So they don't have to get out of their vehicle. They don't have to go into a retail location, because everyone has differing comfort levels. And for those people, they kind of can accomplish both things. So I think it's worked out, but I don't necessarily see it as, it's not really a lifeline for our retailers. Curbside pickup isn't going to be something that's going to sustain them.
Yeah. All right.
No.
Have there been any other discussions about how to better support the restaurants that are not on 4th Street?
So we wanted to go ahead and see how this program was going to work in terms of closing it for Thursday night. It seemed to have been popular, so they opened it up for Friday night. And we are giving restaurants who are not on 4th Street the option to come and locate if they choose to, but we haven't heard from any restaurateurs otherwise.
Part of the issue is whether or not
Belabor this point, but my daughter was in the restaurant business, asking them to bring their product from their restaurant up to 4th Street is not a viable alternative. So I'm really concerned that we're only servicing a very minimal number of the restaurants that are in dire need of support.
the problem is that all the car hops are of that certain age, you see. And so there's nobody qualified to do that anymore.
The grain of Marin again.
Plus, they don't skate.
I've got a quick question. Who actually controls the public spaces, that be sidewalks and parking places in front of buildings? I mean, because I go to Il Davide and I see that they have tables all the way down the street and in front of other businesses. So I'm just wondering if that's permissible, if that's a special permission to do that, or can you just do it? Or how does that get arranged?
So anything in the public right of way is the city's responsibility. and if there's any on-street dining, and that's been a program that I've been working on ever since I've been in San Rafael. You would go ahead and actually get a permit, and it's a partnership through basically between the restaurant and the city. There's a few requirements that we would expect the restaurants to provide us, and we notified the surrounding property owners and occupants to let them know that either a sidewalk or a parking stall is going to be used for outdoor dining. And it really does depend on what type. If it's in a parking stall, it's a little bit more involved because there's a lot of I would say possessiveness with our parking stalls in downtown. So we get a lot of comments. And it's a little bit different if it's like outdoor dining on the sidewalk. It's a little bit more straightforward. That goes to our planning department. Right now, during COVID-19, we have a few programs in place. One of them is just temporary outdoor dining and retail. And we just added salons recently. So you can go ahead and apply for something. It's very quick. It's temporary as long as we're sheltering in place, so that we give restaurants an option to go ahead and set up outside if they'd like to. Outside of, say, dining under the lights, which is just Thursday and Friday night.
But how do some restaurants get permission to put more tables out in front of other businesses?
Like take more space, yeah.
So they apply through the temporary program. It's on our website, and if they want to expand beyond their storefront, they would work with our public works department to see how they could do that.
Simon, is that the extent of like any enforcement on distancing? And the other thing is the permitting process? Because I think maybe you can't help the perception of when you see a crowd there feeling that it's not safe, but maybe if it was more public that, hey, we're adhering to these guidelines enforced by this mechanism, that people may feel more comfortable to be willing to go down and patronize the businesses.
So all restaurants are required to abide by the Marin County health guidelines, one of them being the worksite specific plan, which includes dozens of pages of requirements you have to fulfill in order to operate. And obviously that includes physical distancing, PPE, a whole long list of things that you could probably imagine every type of business has to comply with. They have to have that available on site. I don't necessarily see the customers or clients, asking for that necessarily, especially if you're sitting outdoors. It's probably not going to be something you're going to be looking for. I think people's perceptions will always be what they are, which is, I see a crowd of people, I'm not comfortable, I'm not going to go there. Even if the business is complying with all the state, county, and city requirements. So I think it's really, part of it's probably going to be about education. Like, they can't operate unless they're doing all the right things, but also the city and the county and the state, we're not going to every single restaurant and seeing if they're complying 24/7. So it's really, it's up to the business owner. And, if we get a complaint, then we'll go take a visit. But beyond that, it's really going to be up to the individual business owners.
That makes sense. I'm just thinking in terms of encouraging the business activity, that's some way to promote that this is a safe environment that adheres by the standard protocols. And I don't know whose responsibility that would be. Maybe the BID or somebody can promote that, but that might go a long way to encourage people to feel more comfortable, whereas maybe they would have written it off from the get-go.
Well, I think part of the messaging has been, at least from the BID, that this is an event that for the most part is not to create unnecessary worry, right? Like large crowds. The idea being that, we've actually went ahead and instituted quite a few things and changes to make sure that there is enough space for people to roam around and to do their business. I don't necessarily think it's going to change a lot of people's minds today, but I do get what you're saying. Like if we have more messaging about, restaurants are required to do this and, we have tables spaced out, I think that might help. So I can pass that message along.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think it through. I mean, like you said, maybe there's nothing that can be done, but I know just personally, like if I had never been to dining under the lights, just walking down 4th Street and people are set up on the sidewalk and you walk between 2 tables and you realize you're pretty close to people. Mm-hmm. That might get somebody thinking, oh, there's no way I'm coming down here, even though on Thursday night there's so much more room, people are way more spread out. But just that kind of, I'm just thinking through how people might be perceiving the event.
May I
think
say that
yeah.
putting signs all over is no big help. We have signs every place for 6 and 10 feet and arrows to go this way and not meet somebody on that way. And it makes you not want to participate. We all are getting all kinds of information of what not to do. And if somebody hasn't figured it out after 5 months, putting up another sign is not going to help.
Well, you've also got the effect of alcohol. After people have a wine
Well,
with
that I can't take care of.
I mean, you let your guard down. You just forget about, distancing. It's just a natural thing, and nobody's to blame.
Yeah.
But you also probably can't read the sign.
Yeah, I do think, on top of the communication about it being a safe environment, the actual physical setup of it is really important. I mean, when I look down the sidewalk and see the tables out in front and realize that, this is during the week I'm talking about, realize that walking down the sidewalk is going to get me within 6 feet or at least within 8 feet or so of those tables. And since people are eating or drinking, they don't have masks on. So the actual circulation is really important, I think. And maybe a lot of the tables have seemed to me from a distance to be right on the 6 foot separation versus maybe they should be 8 or 10, which would really convey. I mean, I know that in the restaurants I have eaten in, they've had a 10 foot or so separation, and that was okay. It was kind of borderline comfortable for me anyway. Anyway, just I think the message here is that there is a concern among a lot of folks about the safety, and if there's any way that can be minimized. And one other question I had, Simon, has there been or could there be some coordination with other, God forbid, but other cities and towns in Marin so that they're not all competing on the same night, and maybe they even can joint profile or joint promote that, this night it's San Anselmo night and this night it's San Rafael, and to kind of share the burden a little bit and spread the audience around night by night.
Especially since we've got the good nights already, Thursday and Friday.
I think that's a really interesting idea, Bill. I think a lot of cities right now are pretty selfish, us included. I would say I think we kind of we've been working in terms of coordination with the county. You can probably all guess that we don't work as much with our neighboring cities. And the thing that we've seen is that a lot of the cities are doing very similar things. Some are doing things, and changing as they go. We've heard Mill Valley has had some mixed success, same as Novato. I know of a lot of other jurisdictions who've had some challenges. If you're familiar with Palo Alto, they are going through a very similar situation we are. And they were in the news last night. There's a cohort of businesses who are very unhappy, and then there's a cohort of businesses who are very happy. The ones who are happy are the ones who benefit with the 4th Street closure, and the ones who don't, they don't benefit. And I think that's kind of the difficult part for the city, is trying to balance and weigh the different needs and of our business community, because it's not all uniform. And we're trying our best to see what can work. During this particular pandemic, it's been a little bit hard to have a one-size-fits-all approach. Every time there's a new reopening and there's a new industry or sector that needs to have modifications in order for them to perform their services, it's a lightning rod. And this is their livelihood, and it's very hard for us to do much more than what the state tells us to do. So I think in this situation, we're open to any and all ideas. And that's the primary reason why we have this topic today for the CAC to discuss. So if anyone has any additional feedback they'd like to provide, we're all ears.
A couple of
Well, it
other
seems to me like-
ideas.
Oh.
Sorry. No?
One question
ahead.
I have is, and I think you partly answered it already, Simon, is in order to get the proper spacing, as I understand it, you have to get a right-of-way encroachment permit, even if you're just on the sidewalks. But you mentioned there being some effort, I guess, by some restaurants to encroach into the driving surface itself and taking away a parking place. Can you just sort of comment on that? That gives you that much more space to adhere to 6 or 8 or 10 foot distancing. But is the pushback about eliminating on-street parking spaces so strong that that's not something that's going to be feasible?
I think the pushback was maybe about a year ago in a different time. We had that. That was a very common objection, right? Don't take away our parking stalls. Today, it's not necessarily that there's pushback to take over a parking space. It's that the restaurants don't have the capital to set up a space, even temporarily. So the city has actually received grant funding from TAM to purchase like barricades, planters for restaurants who can't afford that. And we're trying to set it up for them in front of their parking stalls. So I think that's been a big challenge in terms of not having a lot of demand for taking over those parking stalls. So I think in the next few weeks, we'll probably start to see more of these. Right now, we only have one, and it's at Johnny's Donuts. And they've done a great job in terms of trying to take over that space and expand their dining options, which is great. And then there's a few in downtown that have permanent platforms. Those are pre-pandemic, and I work with them closely to make sure that they got the appropriate approvals to set up those spaces. There's a variety of ways for people today to take advantage of those stalls. We just haven't seen a huge demand. I think the restaurants are just hurting quite a bit, and they don't necessarily see this as a viable way to continue their business. They really are hoping to open indoors someday soon.
The economics are such that adding, the equivalent to 2 to 4 tables that you'd get in a couple of parking stalls actually ends up costing them more because of the staff they have to reemploy to service it. So it really is not a good option.
And we've heard that before too. We've heard that, we're waiting to open indoors. We cannot possibly invest any more money into a business for something temporary outdoors that may not yield any additional customers. So that is something we have heard from restaurateurs too.
Yeah.
So
It seems.
You can go.
I was going to say, it seems to me like we've kind of identified 3 areas that might be of concern to our committee. And one would be restaurants not on 4th, particularly B Street, I think is probably the most populous other area off of 4th. Retailers being able to take advantage of the opportunities that this could provide to them, but also making sure that we are sensitive as a community to their needs and how they can be successful as well. And then also just the interest of people to go out both for safety and for frequency. And I don't think there's much that we can do about people's concerns about safety. As Simon said, everybody has to comply by these standards. I know from my own business, they are packets that are thick that you have to comply with. And, so long as restaurants are really abiding by that, the perception and people's own comfort levels just may not allow certain people to come out to enjoy it. But I think that everything is being done right to ensure the safety. So I don't think that there's anything more to be done on that. But if, how can we, would there be the interest if we expanded this? I think would be the other thing that we'd want to maybe discuss or think about.
So I would say that I think that if you were to expand to another day, I actually think you just split the existing customer base, and you'd have the people that went on Thursday would now instead go on Saturday. and the restaurants would have to work 3 times as hard for less revenue. So I actually don't think it makes sense to expand to different days, but I think expanding the footprint and having restaurants off of 4th Street participate would be really important. So I would think about that. I think the program's really important because there's predictions that 60% or more of restaurants will close down. So I think the program makes a lot of sense. The only thing I would say is that we typically find that we don't really get customers until about 5:30. So I would think about the start time of the program as well. So just, it doesn't make sense to have a later start at 6. I think a 4 p.m. street closure is just very early. So.
With respect to parking spaces, I think we're talking about 2 different things. One is the parklet kind of thing,
Yeah.
Which is things which have been built already. And those permanently take up parking spaces. If the street's closed and cars can't be there, then putting up barriers and things like that during that period is not going to steal any parking from anyone because there's no cars on the street. So I think we got to keep that distinction in mind when we're talking about taking away parking. Another thing in terms of expanding, if you have tables 6 or 8 feet apart, that really doesn't help the person who's walking down the street, because even if it's 8 feet apart, they are now 4 feet away from a whole bunch of people who are not wearing masks. So, where they're going to walk is going to be problematic.
Well, in Santa Barbara, what they did is they had a central corridor down the middle of the street. And it was all well-defined with ropes and barricades and everything. And that's where people walked up and down the street.
And that's what I see on 4th Street at Dining Under the Lights. I mean, I don't see many people walking on the sidewalks. It's people walking down the middle of the street with, dining areas roped off on either side of them.
Right, but we don't have a defined corridor there.
That's right.
So you have to kind of zigzag, because some restaurants, their tables go even more than halfway across the street. So you have to kind of go around it. Whereas maybe a central pathway that's 10, 15 feet wide would, reduce people's concerns about being too close to unmasked diners.
Just one other off the walls idea. You guys have probably thought about this. What about inviting, musicians to come down there and liven it up? Are there ways of making it a more lively and therefore attractive environment, but still in a safe way? A lot of people are in the arts are, trying to figure out how to keep expressing themselves. It could be an opportunity for that sector as well.
So we
had quite lively.
Yeah, so we had discussed that, and we went back and forth quite a bit about live music, and we opted not to, just because of the issues with potentially drawing a crowd. And we actually we were supposed to have like a lighting ceremony to christen the new lights that were coinciding with Dining Under the Lights, and we opted not to do that either. We didn't want to have a crowd gather as well. So I think the live music is interesting. We're hoping that we can explore something similar in the future. I don't know necessarily if it will coincide with this event though.
Yeah, and we've actually, just for your rep, we can't have music at our Civic Center Farmers Market per the health department. Anything that would create the appearance of a gathering.
Yeah.
So that's a concern too. And I will say, we work with cities and communities all across the state, and all it takes, like in San Diego, they were doing an event and it was shut down because one person in the community complained and took a photograph of a family, like people that were too close together, and then the mayor closed down the event. So I think it's, you're managing the public perception of safety. So.
But right here in Santa Fe, we already have live music at certain restaurants. There's like 2
Yeah,
restaurants.
there's a few doing it.
Yeah, 2 restaurants I could think of right this minute that have live music as we conduct this meeting.
Yeah, and
it's wonderful, actually. I mean, but
Yeah.
potentially draw a crowd.
Yeah.
right. From my knowledge, I don't necessarily know if that is permitted today. So
If that is what?
if that's actually allowed. So we would definitely need to make sure that everyone is following the same rules. So, you know, I can look into it, but as far as I know, we're not encouraging live music precisely because of the current situation we're in.
Yeah, there's really no entertainment until 2021. That's the expectation in the county. So,
I mean, I'm not
the
complaining.
problem is,
I'm just saying it does happen.
yeah.
yeah. Problem is that if you make that music available to people who are not dining, you know, then you're going to draw a crowd, and there's going to be too many people too close together.
Yeah.
So
That's how good the music is.
yeah, right.
Just remember,
with some of the other things.
This too shall pass. This isn't that we're not setting anything in stone. And eventually, maybe in 2021, hopefully before I leave this world, I'll get to see everybody back again. But this too will pass. And so we just have to be really flexible and recognize that our city budget is really taking a big hit. So when you talk about things, you have to talk about the fact that if we were to put up ropes, for instance, down the middle, who's going to do that? Who's going to pay for it? BID, the city, Chamber of Commerce, what? So got to keep in fact that our budget is not in very good shape.
Along those same lines, I'll point out that, you know, we're heading into August, September, October, it starts to become cold. November, it's definitely cold. And so and then it starts to rain. So a lot of this is very temporary.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Simon, for those permits to encroach on the right of way, what's the term of those? When do they end?
They're ending, I believe, in October, and
Oh.
there's a possibility of extending it. So it's very flexible. This is separate from dining under the lights. Dining under the lights is a
No, I understand.
yeah, different thing. But yeah, at this point it would be up until October, and there is a possibility to extend it depending on the circumstances.
Which makes it even clearer why restaurants are hesitant to put capital into improvements.
Yeah,
for
we
outdoor dining.
definitely see that. So hopefully the grant money will encourage more restaurants to take advantage of it.
Well, I'm wondering if we would want to recommend to council even expanding the footprint, but also potentially if we would want to recommend to them to do a trial expansion to Saturday evenings or something like that.
I would definitely recommend expanding the footprint because again, I feel very strongly that we are impacting restaurants not on 4th Street negatively. As far as expanding to another day, I'm inclined to agree with Andy's comment that I don't think, again, it's an economics issue for the restaurants. And I think we'd have to be very sure that they could afford to do that and truly believe they'd get additional customers. Another thing, because it's another thing that I've learned anecdotally from my restaurant friends, is that the folks that are actually going in and eating in the restaurants outside are the same people that were doing takeout. So they're not incrementally increasing their business all that much.
I would suggest that we maybe encourage staff to, or whoever is appropriate, to explore what may be the most viable area to expand to. You know, we talked about B Street, but is there enough businesses there that it would warrant the additional expense, or is perhaps somewhere else best. I think some more research and kind of fleshing this out, I think, is before making a recommendation on exactly what to do, I think is important.
I agree with Joe. I think this discussion has simply highlighted the complexities. And I don't think we have enough information to recommend anything. I think we should, I mean, if we're going to transmit some information to the city council, it's to encourage their continued, I mean, they've been really, the cities have been very responsive in a complicated, difficult situation. So frankly, we're doing pretty well. But I mean, we have people like the Ida of the BID going door to door talking to people. I mean, she's much better tied into who wins, who loses, and the budgets involved and the safety factors and all this other stuff. So I don't feel comfortable with a strong, clear recommendation because I don't, you know, with respect to the side street restaurants, if they can be accommodated safely, they should be. But if they can't be, they can't be. I don't know what else, you know, what can we say? And if they're not getting enough customers to make this all worthwhile, that's kind of it's just something that unfortunately the community has to live with.
Yeah, and I guess I also feel uncomfortable just because of, we've talked a lot about it and then moved off of it, but the health risks and people actually abiding by social distancing and proper standards and actually drawing more crowds, which to me makes me feel uncomfortable with kind of the values that I'm living in this shelter in place. You know, I don't feel like I'm have enough background in public health to recommend anything, but it scares me that we would inadvertently recommend something that would aid in an uptick of cases.
I'm not suggesting that we recommend anything. I'm suggesting that we ask them to explore the opportunity.
Maybe at this point, and this is kind of a change of protocol or an odd way of going about things, but maybe the right thing is for us as the CAC to communicate with the BID on at least two questions, one of which is, I think expansion, personal opinion, expansion to another weekday night or a Sunday night is a dead issue, but Saturday night might be a reasonable expansion, temporal expansion. And B Street, I can think of several restaurants I go to there, you know, might be an appropriate geographical extension, and ask whether they have either solicited opinions from their members already on those issues and have a position, or whether they want to pursue it, you know, both of those relatively modest expansions, have the BID check with their membership and communicate back to us.
So the BID has actually provided us a lot of feedback about the event, and their position is very similar to Vice Mayor Collins. And I know Mari's communicated with the BID quite extensively as well. Quite honestly, it's additional time and resources that we unfortunately do not have.
I was going to say.
It would be difficult to survey additional businesses on the side streets without incurring additional costs, which is kind of the same thing as expanding the closures in and of itself. So I can say that the BID has some of the same concerns that we do as a city in terms of staffing and funding for expanding. And we're not entirely sure, you know, what exactly is going to be the best benefit. And we're kind of working with what we have right now. We know that the current event on 4th Street is for the most part popular, but we know that there's a contingent of people that don't like it. And we know that we don't know for sure if expanding it to like at a bigger footprint will help. And I don't necessarily see the BID having the bandwidth to go ahead and survey their members for that.
I just feel like I just get a little frustrated when talking about some of this with some people that I've discussed this with in the government, because there are businesses that are literally dying and withering right now. and they are struggling to break even on a good week, on a good month. I mean, it is really dire circumstances, and Andy alluded to it, but Yelp says that 60% of closures, restaurant closures, are permanent. That is San Rafael. We already see vacancies going up. You know, the Ramen Place closed, Iron Springs closed. There will be more, not just restaurants. There will be retailers. There will be all sorts of new vacancies that we're going to see coming up all over San Rafael. And I feel like we have a very narrow window to act to help these businesses. And what's been done already is incredible. And it has been beneficial to the businesses. It's been beneficial to our community as a whole. People are craving that community aspect. People want to come to San Rafael now from all over the county. These are things that we really want to foster in our community. And I understand that there's pushback from retailers. I do not take that lightly. I think that that is definitely something that needs to be figured out. How can everybody benefit? How can everybody get what they need to be successful? Because we also don't want to see retailers leaving and closing down. But to be able to expand to B Street, to be able to expand to another night, whether it's a trial run that our council approves, that we're asking them to look into, that we're asking, you know, to have happen for a month. I mean, there is a very narrow window of opportunity before the rain comes that restaurants and other businesses are going to have to be able to conduct business outside. And I think if we don't take advantage, we are going to see many, many more businesses close. And I understand that there are always going to be, you know, costs incurred. Quite honestly, it seems to be relatively low. Police moving some staffing around, you know, putting up some barricades. It seems to be a pretty low cost for our city to recoup sales tax and keep businesses in business in our community.
Are you making a motion?
I can.
Well,
I'm just
asking, you're asking
at this moment. I'm
somebody.
Yeah. You know, I'd like to hear from everybody, but I think it's important to remember that these businesses are really, really struggling right now.
I think your point is we have to be looking at the longer term and not just the short term. And what is our city going to look like in the longer, you know, once Corona is over? And I couldn't agree with you more that while it may be painful to do a bit more investment now, the longer term notion that we could save some of these restaurants so that we have the character of our city that we've just beginning to enjoy is critical.
Yeah, you know, I agree with Mari. Simon, I just don't buy it that it's expensive for the BID to go to their members and say, hey folks, you're open Thursday and Friday. What do you think of Saturday night? And to
So Bill,
well, let me finish. And my other thought is, it doesn't seem to me like it's going to be that expensive to determine whether there would be interest in closing B Street, portions of B Street, to include a few extra restaurants. I just don't buy that there's a lot of infrastructure expense to just checking that out.
So Bill, we had done a survey before we actually closed down the street to all of our business members to see what days were most appropriate for them. Most of them had voted for Thursday, and then the second highest ranking was Friday, and Saturday and Sunday were the least popular. So we have surveyed them. We have statistics about why we chose the night that we chose, and we have real costs involved to staff the event. And I can tell you right now that I don't know the exact figures from police or special events. We have a special events person who is retiring at the end of August and no one to fill that position.
Ryan's retiring.
So, Ryan's retiring. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He will not be here.
Wow.
So when we talk about costs, I'm not saying we can't do something. What I am telling you is that I'm not here to necessarily sell you on the idea that we have no money. I'm here to tell you the reality. And as a CAC, it's your responsibility.
That's fine. I'm talking about the
Bill, that's not fair. You let Simon talk because you stopped him from interrupting you. So let him
Okay,
finish.
all right, fair enough. Smart.
So-
Thank you, Gladys. I tend to interrupt. I apologize.
As a
Improve my
CAC,
manners.
it will be your responsibility as a CAC to vote on whether or not to do anything about it. It's not my position to tell you what you should think or believe. So I do encourage all of our CAC members to, vote on whether or not they feel like they wanted to write a letter or do any additional type of outreach. But I will say that our bandwidth and resources are very limited, and I'm very familiar with what we're not working with right now. So
I agree with what Roger said earlier, and that is we don't really have enough information to make a recommendation at this point, one way or the other, because, for example, I didn't know that you had surveyed businesses and Saturday and Sunday came out as the least popular for dining under the lights. So you already did that survey. We
that
also
was back in May. Yeah.
What's that?
It was done back in May before the event occurred.
Right. And we also don't have what it costs to actually make this happen on a given night.
We
What is
also
the
don't
actual
have the,
cost? Is it, $30,000? Is it $2,000? I have no idea. But these are very relevant facts that we would need to know if we're going to say, yeah, we should expand to B Street or C Street or expand to another night.
we also don't have the health statistics or info. I mean, again, this seems, look, I would never bring my family down there. It doesn't seem kid friendly in terms of like kids social distancing. They're just not good at it. It's, personally, I don't know. I don't think it doesn't scream.
But they don't get it.
Yeah, I was.
I just don't know the health implications.
Yeah.
And of course,
Social
in any
distancing.
other circumstances and not a pandemic, I'd be all for this. This is like my jam. But this, to me, in these next 2 months, these are going to be tipping point months. I just don't want to push anything that expands on this.
Just to respond to that, so I have a background in public health, and
Okay.
outdoor dining is a very low risk activity compared to other forms of indoor dining or other forms of
Sure, but what about the people walk? I mean, just
yeah, I mean, generally speaking, when people are going out, they're generally remaining with their own households or with their social bubble. And if you're with your social bubble or with your own household, it's generally a very low risk activity. So more so than indoor dining or going to a shopping mall. So,
which I would never do right now either.
So, it seems like we've got a huge variety of opinion, which I think is great. And I really appreciate that this topic, came up. And I wonder, maybe Joe, in taking the notes of this meeting, whether we fall back on, just trying to represent many of the primary points or themes that came out of this conversation in the minutes and passing those on to staff and council so they get the benefit of the discussion.
Rather than writing a recommendation, which I think would be difficult. If it's easy to get, it would be interesting to know what the costs are. I suppose from BID and also from the city. What does it cost per night, per block, or whatever? And when we talk about adding streets, you also got to think about what does that do to traffic, auto traffic. Right now, you've got two ways through downtown, and that's it. Now, at least one of them has become two-way. I'm uncertain about the other one, D and E. But you know, the more we close down to cars, the harder it'll be for people to attend this thing.
May I also say that, and I've had experience with this in the past, when somebody says to a person on staff, we'd like to know X, Y, and Z, what they don't think about is the time that it's going to take for that person to accumulate it. I can remember a time when we had board members that would ask for information, and I asked how much time it would take. For one sentence request, it would take 5 to 8 hours to answer that question. So when you are talking about staff who is limited in time now, think about what the staff has to do to answer your question. So all I'm asking is that you remember that we have a lightweight staff because of budget.
I would ask it a different way. It's what can the city BID, what are the thoughts about what we can do to encourage the restaurants, retail, in other, especially the restaurants in other locations on an ongoing basis? What more is there that the city has thought about besides the dining out 2 nights a week that could be done to help encourage the survival of those businesses?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I'd also add the city just launched its new marketing campaign, Life in Santa Fe. And I think it's really well done. So there's a whole new comprehensive website about all of the various businesses and people that make up the city. So if you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend taking a look at Life in Santa Fe. And I think sharing that website with community members is really important too.
What is the website? lifeinsantarafel.org?
Trying to remember if it's .org or .com.
Didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, lifeinsantarafel.com. It's all about local businesses. There's a whole feature on the farmers market. Many local restaurants and retailers are featured, so I'd recommend visiting that. lifeinsantarafel.com.
Andy, what's being done to publicize that? I've not heard about it at all.
It's just gone through a soft launch, so I think the word's getting out.
So it's been in the works for a very long time and then put on the back burner because of COVID-19. So it is just starting to launch. So there'll be more information coming soon, but you're more than welcome to look at the website. There's going to be a big social media push soon.
Good.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Looks really nice.
Is it sponsored by the city?
Yes, it is the city's initiative. It's really Danielle's brainchild, and we've been working with our merchant community with it for many years now. So it is another avenue for our business community to showcase their strengths. A lot of this was pre-pandemic, but I think a lot of it still applies even in today's environment.
Good.
Good.
Well, we can let these minutes reflect the variety of opinion and some of the topics that have come up. Although there's
Pros and cons.
no real consensus around any of them, but it's a complex subject. But so, got a lot of notes here.
Mari, is there anything more you wanted to say on this?
No,
All right.
I think I've made all of my opinions and passions known.
Well, I think there is consensus on that we're all concerned about the long-term health of retailers and restaurants downtown. Obviously it's, we want to do everything and anything we can within the bounds of our resources to deal with it. But that's about the only consensus I heard.
I think there is probably a majority that would also share concerns about restaurants off of 4th Street. If not a consensus, definitely a majority.
Roger, I think the point you made about weather is something I kind of had spaced on. I mean, how much longer do we have realistically? I mean, just like when does the rain start? Just a month? I mean, 2 months?
3 months left.
All right.
3.5
I mean,
months.
that's important to keep in mind. I mean, that's gonna. What's the benefit? What's the benefit to expanding if we're gonna? I mean, just to take one perspective, if we expand and put effort into doing this for a short window of time, and then it shuts down. I mean, and things start changing so rapidly. I mean, I don't know.
Might just get washed down the drain.
Oh,
I would say on the other hand, if you don't act now while there's opportunity, you're putting these businesses in even graver financial situations.
If in fact they make money by being open.
Right.
I was going to add the same thing. It's not clear at all to me, based on what my walking the street and seeing and talking at restaurants who are tenants of mine, not in Santa Fe, that if you opened up B Street, for example, that you'd make the difference between a restaurant surviving and a restaurant not surviving. Otherwise, they'd be clamoring. I mean, they'd be breaking down the City Hall doors to get something in front of their restaurants. And so, that they have agency also. For us to sit here and opine on it is with such limited information doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I would agree that they have agency, but making sure that as a city, we're giving them every opportunity to succeed. And it's up to restaurants whether or not they want to participate, if it makes sense for them, but giving them opportunities that are maybe more feasible, more accessible than trucking their food down to 4th Street 2 blocks might be worthwhile. And then if they want to do it, that's great. If not, then they have the agency to choose not to.
But if that's going to happen, I mean, remember the issue here is also one of resources. If the city spends $1 on a restaurant that doesn't do anything to help anybody, instead of spending $1 in some other area, that's not good financial management. You have to there has to be some sort of reasonable expectation that it will truly make a difference and that it's worth the manpower, the person power, excuse me. Because just to develop this and arrange for B Street and all that involves all this staff time that they have plenty to do right now. We're in a pandemic. So just working on the maybe that we might help some restaurants on the side streets, but maybe not. I don't think I'm prepared to, as I say, opine on it. You might be right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't know enough. I'm not going to make a recommendation to the council. They're more in tune with this than I am.
It seems to me it's not necessarily all or nothing there's nothing to prevent restaurants that are on the side streets off of 4th Street to be open during the same evenings. They may be open anyway. I don't know that, but they could benefit from the additional foot traffic in the vicinity. I can think of 4 restaurants just offhand on side streets that have already developed outdoor seating areas, either on the sidewalk or in parklets. So I think they could avail themselves of some of this same, as I say, foot traffic without having to go through the closing down of the adjacent street, right? So I think you could have it both ways in a way.
I just don't see that the CAC can make a recommendation that's clear enough. But I mean, all these ideas are good ideas. I think Simon has demonstrated pretty clearly that they've been working on all these ideas. It's not like this we're making up things that the city hasn't worked on also and has either figured out they can do or can't do or won't work or will work. So, again, I don't see a clear recommendation here. I'm sure Simon and the BID and everybody else is fully aware that these restaurants are in peril.
But what have the restaurants themselves been saying? I mean,
that's the question.
Has there been a clamoring for additional, expansion of the dining under the lights?
So the consensus is there's no consensus. The restaurant, we have very different opinions from different restaurateurs who do participate and who don't participate in the event. So it's not clear. We would love to have done a survey and said 80% of restaurants agree on X, but we don't have that. We have restaurateurs who really like it, who want to expand. We have restaurateurs who really don't like it because they have to bring back their staff to, you know, they feel that they're spreading their clientele thin over Thursday and Friday as opposed to just Thursday. So we've had some restaurants who don't like 2 nights a week. We've had some who said, I'm not doing anything outdoors at all. We've had some that say they don't want to do anything unless it's indoors. And that's what it is. You're taking everyone's feedback and trying to balance a solution that will unfortunately be the least offensive. We're not trying to make everyone happy. That's almost a pipe dream at this point. So we want to make sure that we've heard everyone's concerns and we're not, you know, poking them in the eye. So I wish we could say that Saturday would be the absolute best day to expand and everyone agreed. But I don't hear that from the restaurateurs that I talk to. So the CAC has clearly demonstrated tonight that it's not a black and white issue either. There's a lot of different opinions as well. And it's very similar to what we hear on the street, on 4th Street.
Here's an idea, and I don't know that anybody's clamoring for this, but what if there was like a way to open up, have a street closure in some fantasy world here, a street closure on a Saturday that allowed all the Zumba instructors that haven't been able to teach a class for the past 5 months to spread their people out on the street and do something, or you know, your CrossFit people or something. I mean, there's other businesses that have no option right now, right? So.
We do allow them to operate in our parks. They just have to apply through our community services department. So you can actually work out outside if you'd like.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we could come up with a great or perfect solution, but at least we've had a good discussion.
Can we move on?
We can move on unless anybody has any real bright idea about anything that hasn't been discussed on this subject. We can move on to project updates.
Great. So I only have 2 updates. One is for the Goldstone project. That's on 1001 4th Street next to Original Joe's. So that's been going on for quite a long time. To say the least, we are still working on it. We've extended the amount of time they're allowed to negotiate with the city. So an additional 6 months. So the end of December, due primarily to the pandemic. So we've gotten very rough plans. I wouldn't really even call them plans. We have a rough idea of what they want to propose for the mixed use project, the one with automated parking. So our primary focus has been to see if the automated parking will even work. And if it does, then we can move forward with the rest of the project. So we're going to be providing them some feedback, and hopefully we'll have some more detailed news to share with you soon. So that's still happening.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Simon. What's the concern with the automated parking?
The big concern seems to be that we've actually seen it we've seen it in another city in down south in West Hollywood, and the users who are using the automated parking are not short-term users. If you have like automated parking structure in San Rafael, we have concerns that you're not going to be using the automated facility if you're going to drop off your dry cleaning and it takes 5 minutes to park. You're not going to put your vehicle in this structure and then it takes 5 minutes to park it and then wait and when you want to come back and retrieve it. So that's been one of the larger concerns. That's kind of been the experience at West Hollywood. No one uses it for short trips. And in essence, it's not being used to its full capacity. It's actually quite popular if you're like working in the area though. So if you drop it off in the morning and retrieve it at, later at night, for 8 or plus hours. That seems to be when it's used the most frequently. So that's been one of the biggest concerns so far. And it's also an educational piece too, to our downtown users who are not familiar, who most of us probably aren't familiar with automated parking yet.
Does the city feel positively about the direction that this is heading?
I think it's better news that we have progress than if they actually just, you know, bailed on us during the pandemic. They would have had it. It would have been expected, quite honestly. So we're surprised that they're actually very committed to move forward. So we're very happy with that. I think it's just taking a lot, and you all are probably familiar with this. It's just taking a lot longer than we'd like.
Well, they're pretty invested, so I hope that everybody's.
Yes, they are. They own a lot of surrounding property, so we do think they're committed. So that's some of the good news. And then,
one other follow-up question about parking.
Yeah.
I know that lot primarily, I guess this is maybe just my experience and not representative, but the bottom seems to be used for more short-term users, but the upper level seem to be used for all-day long-term parking. Is that
yes,
accurate?
I think that is accurate. It's also very accurate for a lot of our other parking structures too. The longer-term spaces are usually higher up, but the ones that, you know, are on the ground floor or the second floor, they're usually just short-term parking. People want to get in and out of our downtown.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering how much of a issue that would be with the automated structure catering more to long-term.
I don't think it would be a problem per se. I think it would just be, are there any avenues to include some short-term parking in the facility? We don't know. We haven't seen that model where they combine different types of parking. So it's going to be interesting to see. And it is a shared parking facility too. It will be parking for the project itself and parking for the public. So the separation of parking will also be important. And I think that's kind of been why it's taking so long.
So I wonder whether you could think about moving some of the long-term parking from the existing structures to that one. With the existing structures, you know, you're not going to have to wait for some mechanical thing to bring your car down to you. You just get in the elevator, go up there and drive out. Maybe, you know, and it's only a block away, the closer one, the AB Street one. So that might be one solution to, you know.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. We could relay that to the developer. They seem to be keen on just replacing the number of stalls that are currently on that public parking garage and then providing only the minimum for their own project. So the city would have the ability to request that. I think it's going to be something we could relay to the developer as well as our parking consultant too.
So, you know, it seems to me that the obvious solution is to have the ground floor be shorter term parking.
Yeah.
And then above that, have a public portion that was mechanical and accessible. And then everything above that could be for the development itself and theoretically be mechanical. Wouldn't that be a logical separation, way of solving that problem?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, but it's also going to cost more. The automated parking facility, you're required to have a contract with the actual manufacturer, and it's a long-term partnership, and they specialize in automated parking. And the developer, they're incentivized to really take up as little space as possible for this parking with the automated piece of it. And I think there'll probably be some pushback, but I do think that's where the city is going. We'll see how likely it happens, how likely it is for them to see that this is really the direction that we want to go in. So I think it's kind of what we want in the future.
Okay. Well, just one other thing I think to throw in the on the bargaining table here is, I know that the city wants to recover the exact same number of spaces that have been there now for public use, and that makes a lot of sense. However, if the economics of the project made it such that, there were fewer spaces being available to the public, that's a figure that could be monetized and perhaps translated into some other, incentive for something else the developer could put some money into that would still allow them to build their project in maybe a less expensive way.
Yeah, I think that's obviously something that the developer really wants to push. I think our parking services department, though, they have had a lot of parking supply in the downtown that they've witnessed has to them disappeared for a variety of reasons, for construction projects, for this on-street dining, for various other reasons. And I think they're very keen on keeping that number, and they're also wanting to see if they could add to our parking supply in our downtown. I don't know eventually what that number will be, but I think for now it's going to be at least just replace what's currently there. So
Yeah.
we'll see if it goes up or down.
So, just to extend that thought a little bit, to me, the importance of short-term parking is quite high. It allows the convenience of people to park near the shops that they're going to shop in. So
Right.
I think from the public point of view, that's really valuable parking. I have always, I must admit, viewed the long-term parking in the public garages as a reservoir for future short-term parking. In other words, that's the kind of parking, somebody drives in from Novato or Santa Rosa or whatever and sticks their car in a public parking garage for 8 hours while they're working and then has the pleasure of commuting back up, when in fact that commuter could be equally, or I would argue even better served on SMART or on a bus. So I think there's a balancing, of long-term parking, and it's a lower priority than distributing short-term parking as needed across the downtown, in my view.
That would be true if we had good public transit, but even with SMART and buses, to expect people to commute down through other means to make that choice, they're not going to come down. I mean, you can't. That's a fantasy.
I'm sorry, Roger. That's going pretty far in characterizing it. I think it is the future, actually, and it is good transit planning. It's good city planning to look to that future. And we've got, I mentioned two, I think, pretty decent modes of transit serving the two towns that I mentioned up and down the corridor. So anyway, it's something that should be, I think, factored in looking long term. And, Roger and I, we've had this discussion also in the context of the general plan to some extent, and we'll probably have it some more about parking supply and where it comes from.
So the only other update I had is, I think if any of you have been downtown recently, you've probably seen the West America Bank building for sale. And we've gotten a lot of interest from different parties who are interested in purchasing the property to see how they can redevelop that in the future. Our planning department's been very busy trying to field all the inquiries we've received. So we are very excited to see what that will become. It's a very important site in our downtown. It's the gateway to the West End. And if we have any new information or interest, we'll be sure to share it with the CAC as we receive it. And that's my update.
Is the city of Santa Fe interested in that site?
We don't have the money. That's the short of it. I think what we do know is that there's been a lot of interest for long-term care, residential care facilities, but I think there's been a bigger interest to have housing on that site. But at this point, we don't know what will come forward in terms of an application.
Simon, is there an update on the Seagate project on 3rd Street?
I don't have any update on that. Not that I know of. I think, what was that address again?
703 Third.
Yeah.
It's got all its approvals and it's just a
Yeah.
question of whether construction.
I don't know if they've
is-
submitted any building permits or whatnot. I can double check.
And do you know why West Francisco is one way at the moment?
Our Public Works Department had, I think, needed to do additional detours for a project. I'm not entirely sure of the details,
I
but
think that's permanent, Glenn.
What's that? I'm
I
sorry.
think that's permanent.
It's going to be permanently one way going south?
For
Really?
a portion, I think, to Irwin. From Irwin to 2nd Street, I think it's going to be one way because they had issues with people turning right off of West Francisco and then ending up in the smart tracks on 2nd.
Oh, right.
so there was there were conflicts with the circulation, particularly with the smart train access. And that's one of the reasons why that there's been some changes. Now,
Yeah.
I'm gonna include in the chat here for you, Glenn. If you look at the chat, Glenn, there's a website there that describes that conversion on the Public Works website. So you can take a look and see if that answers some of your questions.
Thank you for that. I noticed I got a whole story on the C and D Street two-way conversion, but I hadn't heard about the West Francisco Street
Yeah.
one-way conversion. That's going to change things quite a bit.
I went north on D Street for the first time this afternoon. parked in front of the post office. I got to train myself to understand or know that I can go that direction now.
Well, it's funny. I mean, when was it last like that? Because all the lights are there. So at some point it was.
I remember, and so does Dirk. If you think, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember when they made them one way, and people were, going to kill themselves when trying to get used to that. So now they're going to kill themselves getting unused to it. So it'll just be one of those things.
Simon, what's happening on the Costco project?
Nothing that I know of. They've been radio silent since the beginning of the year. So no
Do
movement.
they have an application pending or
Nope, nothing.
Which project is that, Bill?
Costco?
At Northgate?
Oh,
Yeah, so nothing official. They've been extremely quiet, so we haven't heard anything.
What about the, it's not a retirement home, it's the memory care
The ageist
facility.
living.
Yeah, ageist living. What's
On
going
Lincoln?
On? Lincoln
Lincoln,
and
right.
Mission.
Yeah, so I believe they submitted their building permits, but beyond that, we haven't heard of a whole lot of activity. They're still here though.
The hotel is making good progress. It looks like the Marriott on 5th.
Yes, so they should be pouring, if they haven't already done so, their foundation and their podium. So they're well underway. They haven't had much of a break in terms of construction activity, so that's good. And as you all know, we already approved that hotel on Francisco Boulevard, the Hampton Inn and the H2. So that'll be coming soon. They've already submitted their building permits and they're interested to build another hotel somewhere in the city too.
is that at the corner of Bellum there? Where is
Yes.
that going in?
Yeah.
Right.
Old car dealership spot.
The old Chrysler.
The old Dodge
Yeah.
dealership that used to be there.
Right.
And,
Right.
and then the units at 2nd and B are
Yes.
there
They're
now.
coming along.
815, yeah, B Street. So they're making good progress. Despite a lot of the different sectors and industries that have been, really negatively affected, building and construction haven't been too much. We've seen a slight dip, a few percentage points in terms of their activity, but they were able to really come back fairly strong. So I think they're in a good position at this point. A lot of our approved projects are moving forward. So that's good.
So along those
Simon.
lines, following up on Glenn's question about Seagate, I would add to that question also another project that has a lot of housing units and has been approved by the city, which was Northgate Walk. And I guess my question is, my fear has been that the financing for those things may be what's holding them up because of their, the rental structures have I guess there's some pressure in terms of rents now going, being lowered. But I wonder if you've heard anything about that from the financing standpoint, or whether others on the committee have heard that concern. And then the second part of my comment would be that, anything the city could do to push along those two in particular, since together they represent, several hundred units of housing.
I think you're right. It's likely due to the financing. There's a very different environment we're in today, and precisely because there isn't a lot of financing, it's difficult for projects to move forward and even actually come to the city for any type of application, building permit, or additional review. So I have heard that. It's been a concern of ours for a while. We're 5 months into this. I don't know necessarily if a lot of our approved projects will end up not coming at all. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not sure entirely what the city would be able to do. I can kind of reach out to our planning division and see if they have any ideas.
Great.
Wasn't there an issue with that, with the neighbors? They were suing them, like after they had their approval,
Yes.
there was a private issue between two parties or something.
Yes, it was eventually resolved, but there's a lot of history with that project. Reduction of units, neighbors complaining, potential litigation, things of the sort. So this is just another thing that they have to overcome.
Simon, going back just to a detail on the hotel on Fifth, I was under the impression that that was an independent, and maybe I'm the only one who didn't know, but I was surprised when I saw the Marriott branding on it. Was it always a Marriott?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Was? No, I guess I just didn't realize it. Okay, I think we've covered the projects. Future agenda items. Bill, I think you got something in mind?
I do, yeah. I know the city is about to go next week, actually on Tuesday, to the Planning Commission to review a topic that the CAC has discussed before, which is revisions to the inclusionary housing requirements in the city. So those are now, on paper or about to be made public. I would guess in the next couple of days will be posted. And I think, I would encourage everybody to take a look at them. It's a very important part of the city's ability to provide affordable housing. And the general drift of it was that, these are discussions that some of you have taken part in. The general drift was, by easing those inclusionary housing requirements, we might get more housing altogether built, which would still include some inclusionary housing. So what's being rolled forward is a pretty interesting menu of options for developers. And I think you guys would have some interesting viewpoints on it. So I would suggest that as a discussion point. Hopefully at our next meeting, my understanding is that it's going from planning, the comments from the Planning Commission will be taken back to the planning staff, and then they will rework it to go to council, at least for discussion, possibly for action in September. So I think the timing of our September meeting would allow us to get a presentation, assuming that there is bandwidth from the planning department to provide that and have some discussion about the options that they're presenting.
Okay.
It's a good topic. It's a very complicated menu. And so I would suggest to Bill O'Connell that you allow a lot of time for it if it's going to be introduced and then discussed, because I've had it presented to me and it's like, oh my God, this is complicated. It's not like it's bad. It's innovative, but it's complicated.
Bill, timing, will it be fully teed up, do you think, for discussion by our next meeting?
Well, I haven't heard, it's on the agenda. Have I read the agenda? There's an agenda posted for next Tuesday Planning Commission, and I was told that it was going to be, in fact, received a public notice that it was going to be on that agenda. So I think that's pretty solid, and therefore there will be a staff report and indeed videos to watch and a meeting to tune into if anybody's so inclined. to get a flavor of the complexity that Roger's referring to, and hopefully come to, your own opinions about what on the menu looks attractive.
This meeting was unusual, and I kind of intended it this way, in that we didn't have anybody from the city or any other speaker. This was just a discussion among ourselves. I'm not sure how far we got, but it was a discussion. Is there a staff person who would be Simon or Bill, a staff person who would likely be the right person to talk with us about the inclusionary housing matter?
Ethan, right? Ethan Guy.
Yeah, I don't know his availability. I can check. If the CAC is inclined, they can still meet and discuss amongst themselves, just like we did tonight. If he is not available, but I'll see if he can make it.
Yeah, I think it would be much better if we had the expertise of a staff member to head the discussion.
We couldn't have the discussion without him.
Right.
That's a non-starter, Simon.
Okay.
I would like us to, there's been a discussion about the canal and Northgate being, I believe, their primary development opportunities. I may be saying that incorrectly.
It's priority development areas.
Okay, thank you, Chair O'Connell. But I would like to see us get additional information about what exactly that means and what role we can play there, because I think that's clearly something very much in our arena.
I agree.
Agree.
Anything else?
I have something to bring up. I don't know. It may be just something for us to discuss generally, but I would like your input. Do you think there would be any benefit to us just being briefed, or we don't have to have somebody come, but to talk about what, in terms of affordable housing, like what's going on in Novato? There's a 200+ unit affordable complex proposed, and then also what's happening in Marin City with Marin Housing Authority and the Golden Gate Village down there. I mean, it's outside of the purview of Santa Fe, but I'm curious if there's anything we can glean from those processes. I don't know.
They're both of interest, but I'd be a little wary that we have enough, on our plate dealing with our own stuff.
Agreed. Yeah.
Novato project in particular has stirred up a lot of controversy.
But the Novato project actually is the one we could learn the most from, because it's most similar to what we're discussing for San Rafael. So in that sense, Joe's right, we could learn something from it. I'm not sure how you would structure a presentation that would teach us something, which is all we're asking for. But it's not a bad idea to think about, because those kinds of higher, mid-rise, higher density projects are what we're advocating for. And here you get one and everybody goes ape.
It could be that Ethan could, talk for a couple of minutes in the course of going over those inclusionary housing requirements about that particular project, because as I understand it, what's going on there is that, it was a certain height. And then once they stacked on all of the bonus floors, it became a much larger building, which is the kind of thing that's being considered in the inclusionary housing requirements as well. So there's just a tangential relationship there. We might get.
I agree. I've got to think that Ethan is very well briefed on it. Anything else? Well, we are able to adjourn a little early, I think.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Next month.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.